Namaskar दोस्तों, मैं Amitabh and you are watching Ed-Talks with Amitabh. And as promised, every Monday, 4 p.m. India time, we bring you a resource, someone who has created a social impact or an educational impact, something which is relevant to the society and helped a society become a better place to live and taken it forward. And in this journey today, uh, you know, we are connecting from across the boundary. We are going to take you to California, in the Orange County, a place almost about 9-10 kilometers away from the Disneyland, and we are going to have an educationist, an academician, a professor uh, who has been having a very, very diverse area of interest and has done a lot of integrated research and made a lot of contribution in the field of education and society. She specializes in GIS, that is the Geographical Information System, and social and environmental science. She's a full professor of GIS and social and environmental sciences, and connecting with us from the Orange County. So, and friends, I'm talking about none other than Sheila Lakshmi Steinberg. And today we are, you know, we while I was doing homework, trying to invite her and do the background research, I realized that besides doing so much of academic work, she's an avid Rotarian. She is currently the AG, the Assistant Governor of Rotary District, and that is of Orange County. And so she's been very, very actively involved both in academics as well as in the social sector. And while going through it, she has written a lot of books, and the current book that she's working on, which is already in print and about to get launched in the month of November, December, is a very, very interesting theme, very relevant, very apt in the current times, and that is resilient communities. And friends, with the presence of Dr. Sheila Steinberg with us on our show in this episode today, we would like to keep our theme of our focus, besides learning from her life and times, we would like to use her experience and understand the socio-psychological impact of pandemic and the resilient communities. So without any further delay, allow me to invite Dr. Sheila Lakshmi Steinberg right now in the School Time virtual studio, connecting straight from Orange County in California. Welcome to our show, Dr. Sheila. It's a pleasure having you. I know it's very early in the morning there. It's 4 a.m. almost, or 3:30 a.m. there. So pleasure having you here and keeping you awake so early in the morning.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to see you.
Now, Dr. Steinberg, you have been doing a lot of work in the academic sector. You have been two very distinct dimensions that I can see, rather I would say three in your personality. One is the social worker in you, the community service is there, being a Rotarian, that's very, very evident. You have been a professor, so education is your primary calling, and I could see the writer in you. You have authored so many books as well, and we would like to keep our discussion and journey on the understanding the socio-psychological impact of pandemic. Everyone is, we are in the, unlocked phase of the lockdown, which has been affected because of the COVID-19, and the whole world is affected. So we would like to develop an insight. But before that, I would like to request you to, if you can just share a brief journey of your life for our audience and viewers.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Amitabh. So, greetings to everybody in India. I'm very honored to be here with Mr. Amitabh Mohan. He's a very well-known speaker, and very impressed with all the work he's done so far. So thank you, Amitabh, first of all. Just would like to say that. So interestingly, so I'm a product of the world's two largest democracies, India and the United States. So, my father immigrated, my dad's Dr. Venkatachalam Seshan, he immigrated from India, from what was Bombay, but it's now Mumbai. He's South Indian, by the way, to the United States University of Louisville in the early 1960s. And he met my mom there, Rosalie Session, although she was Rosalie Tanner in those days. And they met and they fell in love. And this was an interesting time to fall in love because there were laws against people of different races marrying, but they were able to work it out and were smart enough to work it out, and then quickly left the South. They were in
Right.
Kentucky and went to the East Coast. So this is my origin. You know, half my family, I grew up coming to India on a regular basis, half my family India, half in Kentucky. Now, jet set forward, I'm someone who grew up bi-coastal, was born in the East Coast in Wilmington, Delaware, actually the state of where Joe Biden, who's running for president, is from.
Okay.
So, in fact, he used to ride the same train that my parents would ride sometimes. So, very
Okay.
interesting. And and then I grew up, and I was an athlete. I was into music when I was young in high school. My my dad, who's Indian, of course, encouraged me. He said, you can't just be lazy. You have to work hard at whatever you're doing. And even though we were financially well off at the time when I was in high school, my dad still instilled this hard work ethic like so many Indian people have. So I went on, got my bachelor's from UC Santa Barbara, got my master's from University of California, Berkeley, and then went on and got my PhD from the Pennsylvania State University. And in between my master's and my PhD, I went and I did a doctorate degree. I mean, before I did my doctorate, I went to overseas in the United States Peace Corps. So I served in the Peace Corps
Okay.
for 2.5 years overseas in Guatemala doing
Okay.
forestry, and I also taught at a university. So that's my life a little bit in a nutshell. I joined Rotary about 22 years ago because I'm very committed to service. And my dad told me stories about when he was growing up in India, how the Rotarians were always making such an impact. And he said, if you're going to join any organization, you should join Rotary. And in fact, now my dad is in my Rotary Club with me. So, and I was president last year, so that was interesting having my dad in the club. He had to listen to me a
Okay.
little bit. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So such a interesting journey that you had, and I could see that the way your dad and mom met, and in the times, and they made things work. I think is that one of the reasons why your research is on the resilient communities? So
You know, you're the psychologist. I should ask you. But I think that, when you grow up and you see diverse people and places,
right.
you actually begin. Sorry, I'm just getting up to let our
No,
dogs
that's
out.
absolutely fine. Absolutely.
You see the value of diversity and different perspectives, right?
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
absolutely, and somewhere it gives you that intrigue as well as the confidence to take that further and understand it more. Now, Dr. Stenberg, I would, you have been, you're half Indian and half American, if I would put it
Yeah.
that way, and your connect with both the largest democracy or one of the world's largest democracies very strong. So
Hmm.
we probably that will give us insight in the comparative perspectives as well of the communities which are there. Now, I would like to begin our discussion with the developing an insight, the sociological perspective of the pandemic, because
Sure.
if I look at my understanding and the experience in last few months, it's been a mixed bag. People have responded to pandemic in the different ways in different parts of the world. But then one thing which has been common, that initially people didn't realize the challenge will be this big. Then there was a phase of anxiety and what the the economic anxiety, and then the medical and the economic anxiety
Hmm.
clubbing together, and then currently people are in a mixed bag of optimism, challenge, and the stress that the people are facing. So, how do you? I mean, as a sociologist, what would be your take on the impact of pandemic on the society, on the sociological perspective of it?
Yes, that's a great question. I believe that, you know, at first when the pandemic hit, it was everybody thought it was a shocker, right? People thought, oh, this will pass. It'll go by quickly. Maybe I can stick close to home for a few weeks or a month, maybe at the most, right? But I don't believe that most people were psychologically prepared to say, this is going to go into its 6th or 7th month, and we still don't know when the end is coming. So I think it's this issue of uncertainty that suddenly got presented to so many people. And some, as you know, psychologically, some people do very well with uncertain times, and some people don't. And so it becomes unsettling. But there's this whole other side, this social, this community side that I've seen come out during the pandemic. I've experienced it myself. I've seen it with my colleagues. But that is that, especially in the United States and probably in India too, people are very busy, right? Everyone's busy. You say, how are you doing? They go, I'm busy. I'm good, but I'm busy. And so families are on the go. You work a full 8 hours, sometimes more, sometimes 10. You work at home, and your children are busy. Like, our children are not just sitting at home. Like, when I grew up, I was involved, but I wouldn't say that I was as busy as our son is, for instance, because he's in so many activities, Boy Scouts, basketball. And so our lives are very scripted, and oftentimes we find ourselves outside of the home, okay, for a good majority of our day. With the pandemic, it shut down all of these things that we used to go to, the gym, for our son, restaurants, we would eat out a lot, going to entertainment activities like Disneyland or the movies, at concerts, right? We're very close to LA. And so all of that got shut down, and suddenly we were all forced to be in the home together. And when does that happen? So it's almost like society, these environmental forces, these health forces, turn back the clock to an earlier time in our society, where, like, maybe the 1940s, 1930s, when people were more home in the home, right? And so this stressed people out, but we are seeing the very positive side of that, which is, like, I see my husband every day. He's a boss at Los Angeles County. He's in charge of all the GIS for Los Angeles County. He's working from home. He's been working from home since March. Otherwise, he was on the road 3 hours a day commuting, 1.5 hours up, 1.5 hours back. Our son out every day in the gyms. Now he's home. And so he's starting to be out more than us. But we have this more family togetherness. My parents, they were always kind of home, but they were out and about too. So now we're forced to interact. This forced interaction, and I'm an interactional theorist by training in my dissertation, leads to good things. It can lead to some bad things, of course, but it leads to actually these forming of these community bonds that perhaps somehow had gotten a little bit frayed or lost through our busyness of being outside of the home, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And the other thing is, we have to be creative. And so I'm a very networking social person. So when I was then told by my work, which is only about 3 miles from my house, nobody can come in. This was in mid-March. Everybody stays home and, just work from home. Luckily, we all have computers. We can do that. I teach, all my teaching is online, so that's fine. But then my interaction with colleagues was somewhat limited. So I started actually creating new networks with new people all across the country in the United States, in my various professional societies. And I even joined a new group called Women in GIS. And I've helped them to do a speaker series. And just, you make all kinds of new networks when you have the time, right, to think creatively. You know that psychologically, if you have time to think creatively, you'll do different things maybe than you did in the past. So I see that there's a very positive side to the pandemic. We don't talk about it a lot because everyone's so busy being stressed out. But really, if you look at it, there's a very creative and communal side that's emerging.
Absolutely, and this you quite rightly said, and that's what my perception has been during this time, that it has given a lot of me time to us, the family time to us, which is helping us relook at a lot of lost time, doing the catching up and strengthening the family bonding, and which I think has been a major positive. But then there are two aspects to it which are being seen. One is on one side, wherever there is there was a breakdown of communication between the families that's getting strengthened, but then there have been the negatives also coming up there. That is the domestic violence has been found to be going up. People who were already in a conflicting relationship, now being confined to stay together, and not having that diversion is also getting affected. So what do you think, the positive or the negative, which has been more in your experience?
Well, I mean, I think that it sort of depends on the person. So in my experience, because I probably have perhaps a somewhat golden view of it because my husband and I have kept our jobs. We haven't lost our jobs. We're fortunate. Our son has continued to be able to learn, even though it's virtual and online.
Right.
So there, and then and so far, luckily, we've kept our health because we're careful about where we go. We listen to the science and we pay attention. I mean, part of what my husband does, he works with the GIS data every day. So he's very aware of where are the hot spots, where should we go, where should we not go. And so I think part of how our family has reacted is very data driven. My family's taken a very data driven approach. We even made our son write some papers on it because at first, right, we're such academics. At first he was like, I don't believe this. We're in Orange County where a lot of people are a bit deniers of the fact that it's so bad. They like to have their businesses open. They like to enjoy their life, and they have money and they want to spend it. And so, we're in this place where that happens. We had to tell him, no, the science is saying that, this is happening. And so, so we made him research it and write some papers. That's the problem when you have a parent who's an academic. He goes, Mom, can you just stop being a teacher, right? When you're at home and just be a mom. And so he found some interesting statistics, but still, I think, is it good, is it bad? It's always a balancing act, right? And I think if you came into it in maybe a tenuous relationship, it's going to probably be bad because you're stuck with that person, right? But on the resilient side, maybe if you were sitting on the fence of what should I do, is this good? You gain a lot of clarity. I think what the pandemic has done is it's helped us all to gain clarity about what is important, to reassess our lives. You can't but help to do that because you have a lot of time to think. Even though you're perhaps working, many of us who have white collar jobs are fortunate enough to be able to stay at home and work. Those who have blue collar jobs, not so fortunate. So it's also highlighted the extreme inequality in our society because we see those folks who are not as fortunate, let's say as myself, going out on the front lines is to work in food or health, and they're more at risk. So I think it's exposed a lot of things in our society too, and it's made us be more. The social justice movement that's risen up, I believe, in strong part, is tied to the pandemic. I mean, it's definitely tied. Yeah.
It surely is, and this brings me to an intrigue. Of course, while you were talking about your son and the way you have you know channelized him towards the constructive side, the place where you are, the Disneyland being just about in your neighborhood. I think the symbolic optimism is there. Walt Disney once said, "If you can dream it, you can do it." And I think that optimism is there in the environment where you are in right now, and I think that is also giving a lot of positivity there. Now, this also brings me, Dr. Steinberg, that you are a professor of GIS, Geographical Information System, and
Mhm.
communication is one of the very important. Uh, it has featured in our community last 6 months, all the more.
Mhm.
These pandemic times. I can talk in the Indian context, and I think the whole world has become more digitized. More connected. We are
Mhm.
virtual world is actually becoming more of a reality for us in these 6 months time, and the information flow, the communication flow has been both our advantage well as a disadvantage. I've seen in the communication network that we have has created a lot of rumors about the pandemic, and the COVID has led to spread of misinformation. On the other side, that is the tool which is also providing us with the information. And on the
Mhm.
other side, I think even GIS has been used for tracking COVID. So,
Mhm.
how does this whole science and communication gets integrated in the context of COVID and the current pandemic that we are all facing?
Sure, I'm happy to answer that question. So, I've been working in the field of geographic information systems for a little over 20 years and learned it back at Penn State University to look at this. I used it in my dissertation to look at the relationship between environmental change, how an environment changes, and social change over time, over a period of about 40 years. And so, the biggest thing about GIS is that it's always been there. Our military's always used it. The natural resources have always used it to manage resources. The general public wasn't aware of it. We kind of got aware of it with GPS, global positioning systems, with Google Maps saying, oh, I
Right,
need to find a place to go to eat or wherever, a location. The general public gained more awareness of it with that. Now with COVID, we really gained awareness of what was happening with the disease because suddenly, as a society, a global society, we were faced with an issue that had a very spatial component. And suddenly we were all very interested in where is this going, right? Geographically, where is it starting and where is it going? And so when we look at the Johns Hopkins maps, those became the gold standard. The GIS Johns Hopkins maps became the gold standard for looking and understanding the spatial distribution of the disease. And those maps are powered by a company called Esri. ESRI, which is out of Redlands, California. My university works very closely with Esri. A lot of the books that I do come out from Esri Press. So they're the really like Microsoft of geographic information systems and mapping. But I think the beauty of it with communication is that, that saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So that's the case. Like you can look at the COVID map and say, I see and I understand, and this is the relevance to me. So I think what it does is it establishes context
right,
of place and of relevance. How does this relate to me? I remember I read a very, very small article about this disease before it was named, like around December 28th. I was reading in the newspaper about this unknown respiratory disease that was found in China. And the second I read that, I was like, uh-oh. I got a weird feeling about it. Like that's not good. If China has an unrecognized disease, that's not good. Even though it's all the way across the globe in China, that's for me in Irvine, California. I said I got unnerved by it. The mapping came out on that in about early January, in January, maybe mid to late January. And I started watching this and I was like, this is not good. This is not good. When we watch it and you see it, the exponential growth. So I think that with so many things in our society, if you can visualize it, you can understand it. And when you're trying to communicate with the public, again, I would come back to a picture's worth 1,000 words. And when you can establish context, this is something
right.
that we do in my discipline all the time. As sociologists, we don't just look at the individual by themselves. We look at the individual in the context of their engagement with society and the society's impact on the individual. When you look at COVID, you can't help but look at what is it doing to individuals, but then also more importantly, from a global perspective, what is it doing to the world and to societies?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you raised a very important point. You made a statement that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I would like to expand it to raise my next query, and that is, but the problem is when there are 1,000 pictures, because then the number of words amounts to information overload. and,
Yes.
uh, and I think this communication in last 6 months we've seen. Even if I talk about myself.
Mm-hmm.
We on this 15 screen, we are connected to the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
With a mobile in our palms, we are connected to the whole world. And I'm listening to the the head of Pakistan. I'm listening to Trump. I'm listening to everyone, and everyone is giving their take and their
Right.
perspective in their own cultural context. Now,
Yes.
but then somebody says take COVID lightly. Somebody says it's too serious. You cannot ignore it. Somebody says that we do not have a lockdown. Someone else says that creates a lot of confusion.
Mm-hmm.
You can call it a kind of a social dissonance because of the
Mm-hmm.
information disparity that we are getting. That is on one side. On the other
Mm-hmm.
side, there's a lot of people. There's so much available on in terms of information nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
What to believe, what not to believe is also a challenge, and that creates confusion. And I could see that the kind of uh, as the lockdown is, we are in that unlocked phase. There are people who are, they're making their choice of information to believe in, and
Yes.
some are getting casual, some are still being
Yes.
cautious, which is a major challenge. What is your take on that?
Yes, this is a very good question, and it's a dilemma that we face worldwide. And I think, we're in the information age. You're surrounded by data every day. I teach about this in my classes, and I also teach my students the skill set of how can you tell the difference between what is good data and what is bad data. And I've made
Right,
videos on this for the students with my university, and really what it boils down to is critical thinking. Okay, so it's having the
right,
ability to look at information and to say, do I trust the source of this information? Does this information make sense to me personally, right? Just using
right,
my brain as a human, does this make sense? And I think some people, as a college professor, my main goal really when I teach is to teach my students how to think critically. Okay. And when you're
right,
looking at data, for a person who's not a college student, they're not in the classroom, they're going to probably take the path of least resistance. Like, well, what do my friends believe? Like, a lot of people get their news from Facebook, right? Like, and sometimes it's you hear things quicker through your social networks and social media
right,
than you do by sitting down and watching the news or listening to the radio or reading it.
right,
And who even reads a newspaper anymore? I mean, I do, but most people are consuming their
right,
data digitally. So I think
right,
it's a societal issue of, people are busy. They don't want to take a lot of time to really try to become a scientist and try to have to make those decisions. So this is where, leadership in a county, in a city, in a country becomes very important. And I think having a cohesive understanding of data and being data driven. Now, some people are having a backlash against being data driven because they're not scientists and they don't see the value, and it's not the outcome that they want. So if it's Christmas morning and you want a brand new train and you get some books, you're not going to be happy. You're going to say, well, I didn't want the books, I wanted the train, so I reject this. This
right,
is the same thing with COVID. The data comes out on a daily basis. Some people say, I don't like that data. You know what, let me go find some data or information that I like. It's the same thing on global climate change. There are some scientists who actually will say it's not happening. And then there's more scientists who say, no, it is happening. And then there are people who experience flooding and they know, okay, it is happening, or extreme weather. So I think we've entered an age in life, in our society, where there's so much information. We have too much choice, which too much
right,
choice is good. But then if you fail to think critically about the information, and if you fall into the trap of doing group think, quote unquote, which is you just start thinking like the masses and you lose your ability to think critically, then you're in for it. And I feel like this is what's happening around the globe. Some people are trying to be more cautious and others are not. Some can also point the finger of privilege and go, well, you're privileged. You can stay at home and work and be safe as anything. But the people who are like working in Taco Bell or the restaurants, they have to go to work, or hospitals, they don't have the luxury that you do. So it's exposed, it's really, it boils down to critical thinking, and we all need to think critically. You do not need a PhD to think critically, at all. You just need to have a brain and to try to understand what's going on.
absolutely. And I think that is very, very important. And it is going to be our ability to logically deduce and infer and make the right choices, because the choices are going to determine our perceptions, and that is how we are going to respond. And yes, information is there, but it is a tool in our hand, and more logically critical thinkers we will be in a better position. This also brings me, when you talk about it, lately in the context of COVID, we've been noticing that different countries, different nationalities, the statistics is different. The survival rates in different
Hmm.
places is different. The way the countries have evolved their policies respond to this pandemic has varied, and that also brings to an issue that how resilient is the word in different communities are to face the challenge. Uh, has our development made us weaker to face the challenge, or has it prepared us to face a challenge of this magnitude? And I think no better person than you to talk about resilient communities, because I understand that you're working on this current book. And friends, you are listening to Dr. Sheila Steinberg, and who has worked, who's a professor of GIS and social and environmental sciences. She's a faculty president, GIS discipline leader, and she has authored various books, extreme weather, health, and communities. She's current, the latest book, which very soon you and I will be able to read, is Resilient Communities Across Geographies. And this particular book and her work intrigues me to make use of her research and understand resilient communities in the context of pandemic and COVID. So first of all, congratulations for such wonderful work that you're doing, Dr. Steinberg, and even the current book that is there, Resilient Communities. I don't know, when did you start to write? And I would like to know that, because it's very, very timely, because we right now, communities are challenged, geographies are challenged. How did you come up with this idea of this book?
Very good question. So my husband and I, we collaborate quite a bit on books, and we started thinking about this book about, especially in the area of GIS, about 4 or 5 years ago, and got really excited because we love the power of GIS. In fact, he and I met because of geographic information systems. That's another
Okay.
story for another time, but we call it GIS love, because we met because of this technology and started working together because of this technology. But we, at the time when we pitched this book, because when you're going to do a book, you have to come up with a pitch for it and a proposal, that so much of the work that both of us have done has been with communities. To me, as a sociologist, my main focus is the community and trying to help communities to be stronger. And I always like to take a strengths-based approach and say, a lot of times people look at people in a place, and they go, these are the weaknesses. Oh, it's not going to work. And I like to look at a place and go, these are the strengths. I think that we can identify the strengths and build off of them to make change, to do policy, etc. So when we came up with that book, it was really with that theme or notion that we felt that this technology, geographic information systems, is a technology that could be accessible, that could be used to collect data, to analyze data, to tell stories about data, and to communicate a situation, what's going on in a particular place, to give a holistic view of problems. And then you can get to problem solving when you can break a problem down into its composite parts. So this is really what we saw, the power of communities, the power of people in different geographies across the globe to use this technology. And so that's how we got the idea. And then we tried to get, we have the indigenous Martu people in the Aboriginal people actually in Australia who are using it to manage their water resources in a place where there isn't much water. We have the farm workers in California that we worked with who have used GIS to look at pesticide drift and then how to keep their community safe. And we actively gathered their local knowledge and mapped that and included that. We look at the inner cities, how people who work with youth are using this to look at gang activity, and then also positive youth engagement to map that. So, we looked at up in Canada, how there are outreach. Some of our authors for this book, because it's a collection of case studies, are looking at how Indigenous youth are using GIS to map their resources and to engage and to protect their landscapes. So, it's really a powerful tool. GIS is a powerful tool, the spatialized mapping, but it's how you use a tool, right? And so
in fact, just to add to what you said, that even in the context of COVID, Indian government has come up with an application where we are all logged onto it, and we know that through GIS mapping that if there is any COVID, how close or far away we are from the COVID patient who's a diagnosed COVID person. So it is used even for that purpose in our context. So it's been an amazing application of GIS.
Right. Right. And getting back to your question about resilient communities and what makes them perhaps, I believe that every community has the capacity, the potential to be resilient. Whether or not they realize that capacity, a lot of that depends on leadership in the community. A lot of that depends on social forces, right? What is happening environmentally to the people in that community? And at what point do people in that community decide to say, I want to use data, I want to use science, I want to use local knowledge, okay? Because local knowledge is very scientific and you have to document it, right? Capture it. And that's what the GIS can be used for as well, to say, to really get a full picture of a problem or an issue, let's triangulate, let's look at it from multiple angles. And if you do that, then you can have a more realistic view of it and try to solve it, come up with policies. And so this is really kind of the focus of that book. We call it Resilient Communities Across Geographies, because we feel that everywhere in the world, there's opportunity. Some places that we became aware of have realized that. And so we try to present case studies of that, by finding authors from around the world to contribute chapters, and that's really so.
This
Yeah.
brings me for the benefit of our viewers. When we say resilient communities, so can what do we mean by resilient community?
Sure.
What are the
That's
parameters when we'll call that community is resilient?
Sure. I think so. Resilience in concept is this notion. It's used in a lot of different contexts. It's often used
Right,
with environmental contexts, but we took a broader view to say social and
right,
economic as well. So if you think about it, what makes someone or a community resilient? It's the ability to adapt to change and to alter your direction, to adapt to some change, some challenge that's coming. It could be that a bridge gets washed out in your town. It could be that the sea level rises. It could be that COVID comes and you're a
right,
community and you're a rural community with little to no medical resources. So it's how do
right.
you how do you respond and how do you react, and what course of action do you take to respond to this challenge? And so we feel that by its very nature, a community wants to survive, right? So their communities aren't just going to be faced with a challenge and throw up their hands and go crazy. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. People have the innate will to survive. So when people in a place put their heads together to think about, we have a problem, how can we solve this, what are we going to do, usually there are positive results. And some of the best places I've seen this have been in these rural environments. So I have a PhD in rural sociology by training, which is interesting because I grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles. So you'd go, why'd you go study this? But
Mm-hmm.
to me, it was always really interesting to see how do small towns function? How do people work together? And usually small towns are very resilient because of the social networks, because people know each other and they're more willing to help their neighbors. So like I
Right,
remember in the one extreme weather book that I wrote a few years ago with my colleague Dr. Bill Sprigg, we I had to write about a case study from Humboldt County where I used to live. We worked at a university up there, my husband and I, and they were hit with a very bad flood in 1964. And the National Guard had to come in, but they didn't come in for like at least 4 days, 4 or 5 days. And so people were flooded out. They were floating in boats. People had to figure out ways to help each other. And in the rural environments, in the poorer communities, people are often much more willing to lend a hand and step up because they have to. It's part of what they do. In the more urban
absolutely.
environments, upscale environments, how often do you go to your neighbor's house and say, can I use your washing machine? Mine broke. Right. So it's like we don't have to, when we're in wealthier communities, we do not have to rely on the people around us. In poorer and more rural, yes, you do have to rely on people around you. So I feel like this is also part of resilience, the social networks and how we tap those and how we use those. And this is really coming true in the age of the COVID-19, the pandemic. We see the power of the social networks in combating this disease.
In fact, social networks are have been the strength during these times in last few months for all of us. And wherever the social network has been stronger, we've got better response to the pandemic needs and the demands as well. But you raised a very important point there, that smaller towns have a, are more resilient because their social networks are stronger. Uh, and what would be the reason why the smaller towns have been able to maintain their social networks, whereas more developed and more advanced, bigger communities are not able to maintain their social networks?
Sure, I remember, and I want to just say, bigger towns, bigger cities can be resilient too. So we're not just, I'm not painting a panacea that it's always small towns, but
Right.
there, but to highlight the social networks, there's one article I remember reading when I was doing my dissertation called "The Strength of Weak Ties." Right, weak
Okay.
ties are more collegial. They're not your best friends, your closest people, but they're more acquaintanceship networks, and there's a strength in knowing a lot of people, right? Because if you need something in a small town, you go, oh, so and so fixes cars, so and so fixes boats, so and so, if I'm sick, I go to this person. And I remember being in my Rotary club. I've been in Rotary for many years, and 22 years, and in every small town I've been in, it's been so wonderful to be in Rotary, because I would know all the different resources in the town, right? Suddenly you would meet everybody who are
Right.
movers and shakers. So it's kind of a microcosm. When you're in a smaller town, people know each other. They're more willing to help their neighbor because they know you, right? And then when you're in a larger environment, I remember when we moved from Humboldt County, which is very small, and if I were to drive to Humboldt County today from Orange County, it would take me a good 10 hours driving, like the whole
Right.
day, and I'd still be in the state of California. But we came to Orange County, and I would go to the grocery and I wouldn't know anybody. But in a small town, the second even I would go back to Humboldt County, I would go into the grocery store. Even 5 years after I left, I would still know people. So it's that sense that when you know your neighbor and you know your community, you're more likely to help. You may gossip more in a small town about your neighbor, but
Right.
when push comes to shove, in a bigger area, we're a little more diffuse, a little more independent, and that can be good and that can be bad, because in more suburban areas, how often are people talking and interacting with their neighbors? Not so much until the pandemic, when everybody got stuck at home. And then you saw
Right.
neighborhoods getting together on the cul-de-sac, socially distancing. So even in my own neighborhood, on my own block, I'm interacting more. I see my neighbors more because they're not driving 50, 60 miles to work. They're now at home. They're working from home. So they might come out to get the mail or whatever. So I think that's part of it. Yeah.
That's absolutely part of it. And just on a lighter note, on a Rotary context, I think you and I both have a common connect, being Rotarian from two different corners of the world.
Yes.
And and you said, just in a light, on a lighter tone, you said movers and shakers. The next RI president is going to be Shaker.
Yeah.
And Shaker Mehta.
That's good. That's good. That's what we need. Yeah.
But that's just on a lighter note.
That's funny.
So
Yeah.
this very, very relevant point you talked about, that even on one side we're talking about social distancing. The word,
Yeah.
the buzzword was that the way to win over the pandemic and COVID
Mhm.
19 is social distancing. But then, paradoxically, it is making us getting more socially connected. I think
Yes.
our, as you also said, that you are getting to see your neighbors more because nobody is going to office and everyone is working from home, and is more seen around in
Yeah.
their local area rather than in their workspaces,
Right.
and people have more time as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Yes. Yes.
how do you think this, after this pandemic gets over, uh, how do you think the society is going to change or evolve?
I think society will be forever altered. And I do think we're in for the pandemic we'll be dealing with the effects of the pandemic for a few years. It's not, because we often talk in our family, like,
Right.
oh, won't it be great when we don't have the pandemic, when we don't have to wear a mask, when we can go out and, go to parties or whatever. And then we stop and we go, but will there ever be a time? Will there be a time when we don't have to wear masks and don't have to be conscious of washing our hands and socially distancing? I do believe that day will come, but when it will come, I don't know. It's in the future, right? So I think
Right.
it's really thinking about um how do we deal with things today? What are the lessons that we can take away from today? And then how do we put those into play tomorrow when a whole society experiences, I mean, a whole globe, a whole world experiences this. This isn't something that just India experienced or the United States. I mean, everyone, everywhere. You would think when you watch those sci-fi movies, right? That when there's an external threat like extraterrestrials or a disease or something, like everybody pulls together, right? And then Hollywood gives it a good ending, right? Because we all pull together. In a way, I think that is happening with some scientific collaboration, with some problem solving. Look, we have to look at, well, how did China deal with this? How did Germany deal with this? How is India dealing with it? How's Brazil? How's the United States? There's almost like this running scorecard out there of which country is doing better, and no one wants to end up on. You have more people. A lot of times, more is better. In this case, more is not better. You don't want to have more people with the disease, but
Absolutely.
so I think it's learning, really, like it's forcing the bigger countries like the United States to perhaps take a look at other countries, other models, and say, what have they done over there? What have they done in Europe? What are they doing in India? What have they done, in Japan? And what's worked and what hasn't worked? And in a lot of places, what it boils down to is communication, leadership, and science. And I think that I was raised to be a scientist. I was taught the scientific method, and kids are taught the scientific method in grade school these days. There's nothing wrong with science. There's nothing wrong with the scientific method. In fact, we all should be thinking along the lines of the scientific method every day because it helps us to think critically about what we absorb. So again, in my mind, it boils back to data, being data driven, understanding what's going on. I mean, that's what successful corporations do, right? McDonald's doesn't just decide, I'm going to just throw McDonald's over here. I just because I feel like it. No, they do a data analysis. They make a strategic decision to make more money, to maximize their profits. Same thing goes for health. If we're going to combat COVID, we have to bring together our resources to think, where is it? What's happening? What are the contextual environmental factors? What are the weather factors? What's happening when it becomes fall and winter. Right now, we can eat outside. Well, what happens when we hit November, December, right? So these are all thinking that big picture, though, and then
Absolutely.
pulling
And I
together.
think
Yeah.
I think it's never before, other than one part of the whole world, the world was ever so united on a single issue.
Yeah.
Nothing else is more important than the pandemic, and everyone is willing to cooperate and coexist. And I think, but for, of course, one part of the whole world where the origin of COVID has happened, I'm sure that also will get unified in times to come. uh,
Yes.
Once, let's be optimistic that the world remains we become more global citizens rather than living within our own boundaries.
Right. And Amitabh, you know this, being a Rotarian, every month we get that magazine, The Rotarian, right? Or they recently
Absolutely.
changed the name of it to Rotary or something like that. But you see
Right.
that magazine, tells stories, right, of people around the Rotarians around the world who are making a difference. And I think that, maybe you want to say something about that because you're in Rotary and your club's probably doing things, and, maybe
Absolutely.
share for our readers about that, our listeners.
There has been a lot of work. I am part of Rotary Club of Belur in District 3291,
Hmm.
and which is one of the oldest district in India. That is District 3291, and almost everyone is channelizing their resources. We have Rotarians who have been the frontline workers, and they are now. They've gone through the suffering of the COVID themselves because they were trying to provide the food, they were trying to provide the medical facilities. Everything, everyone is coming up, and I think, and also. We have been thinking like a whole district, not independent clubs. Everyone, wherever the need is, everyone is co-creating and projects and providing the support. So I personally feel that Rotary is a reflection of the whole, the larger world, and coexistence has always been, and co-creation has always been the buzzword for I think our last year's tagline says it all: Rotary connecting the world. And
That's right.
that's and I think COVID also has connected the word in a different way and a different
Yes.
sense of the word. Now, here, one perspective that I would like to ask you is when you said that it's word is going to be majorly different, and
Mhm.
the science is going to play a major role in times to come, and even the social bonding is going to go, undergo a change. People will realize the value of the human relationship and human bonds, along with the relevance of the science, and that's going to be a good marriage of the two sides of the coin, which have so far been considered to be extreme. I think there will be a merger and amalgamation of that, which is going to take place in times to come. Uh, you just If we look into resilient communities, because you have done your a lot of work there,
Mhm.
I would like, how do you rate India and the United States in terms of resilience?
Well, I think that, let me start with India and then I'll come to the United States since you're
Right.
the host country for my talk today.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
on my various trips to India and growing up, being half Indian and having Indian relatives and being exposed to Indian community, one of the greatest strengths I believe of Indian people is their compassion for others, right? Their sense of that it's bigger than myself, that I'm part of a larger group, and when whatever my actions are, they are part of a larger group, and I need to consider the people around me. It's a India, I found, it's one of the oldest societies, and there's a reason that India has been around for so many years, because and survived colonialism, and to come out and to be leading the world in tech, because there's a reason, because of the characteristics of the culture and the people. So I believe that even though India has a very high population, and it could be doing very badly, I believe that the people there, they believe in science, they believe in taking action, and they believe in helping their neighbors. And so really this cognizance about my actions affect my neighbors' actions, affect my communities health and well-being. This is what it boils down to. If you have a sensitivity for that beyond yourself, right? We all want to be successful and say me. But if you're a society and a culture that also believes I have to take care of my neighbor, my people who live in my apartment, whatever, it becomes large, it affects your actions. So this is I think India is extremely resilient. India is a country that's had to face much worse things than the pandemic. I mean, how many countries can say that they were colonized and came out on the other side to be a world leader in technology? This is what India has done. So that, to me, COVID's just a blip in the road. And
Right.
India is overcoming it. It is, and I feel that we'll always come out smelling like a rose because of this communal nature and strength of social networks. I think, and belief in science, I think, are really important parts of that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that way, the social networks in India are still very very strong, across the length and breadth of the country. And yes, we basically are believers. It has to have a logic, be it
Mhm.
spiritual or scientific.
Yes. And in the United States, we are a large democracy as well. And with that democracy comes a lot of freedom. So we, as a country, did not approach the COVID the same way a country like China did. We approached it quite differently. And I have Chinese neighbors, so I talk to them about, like, well, it sounds like this is how they did it over there in China,
Right,
and now things are on the mend. It hit China first, so you would naturally expect that things would be getting better over there. But
right,
our in the United States, I think we're still finding our way. I mean, I love the United States. We have every resource possible. We're a
right.
wealthy nation. We do have poverty. I feel like the United States is a very resilient place as well. We have a lot of, and I think our resilience owes itself to the diversity of our people. We are not a monochromatic society. We are very, we have people from all over, and every country in the world is represented in the United States. That can be good, but it can also be challenging, because you go, well, people aren't all thinking alike. They come at things from different cultures and backgrounds. But then I come back to, again, this notion of science. Data doesn't lie. right? So I say, if it's good enough for us to teach our children in fourth grade, they do science fair in fifth grade. If it's good enough
Right.
for our kids who are in fifth grade to do science projects and science fair, why isn't it good for enough for our society? And I'll leave it at that. The data speaks. I think the best thing to have happen is sports are back in the United States, because why do I say that? There's this connection between sports and science. Sports
Uh-huh.
can't be happening without the scientific testing. The bubble we're all watching, the NBA playoffs, couldn't be happening without the rapid testing every day. The National
Absolutely.
Football League couldn't be happening without the test. So it's making us realize as a country, hey, you like sports? Well, if you want sports to happen, the
Absolutely.
players, they have to get the test, right? So it's bringing science to the forefront. I think we're in a new age of recognizing the value of science, but yet there's pushback on it too, because sometimes science tells you, like a parent, no, that's kind of looking not so good. You can't go out this weekend, and if you're
Absolutely.
a teenager, you don't want to hear that, right? You're grounded.
Absolutely.
You
And,
don't want to
and
hear that. Yeah.
as you quite rightly pointed out, I think with the other changes, the social changes that you and I are going to experience in the scientific world, the data sciences, the data analytics is going to become even more relevant and more used in times to come for strategic decisions, as you pointed out there.
Hmm.
And it's been very informative listening to you on the various dimensions. This before we, it's almost about an hour that we've been together, and I would while I was doing a research on you, I realized you are working on the methods of storytelling when it comes to and GIS and in the context of that. So I would like to throw a light, and I would like my viewers to be enlightened on that aspect as well.
Sure. So storytelling, right? We grow up as kids with stories, and you can remember, right? You think back to when you were growing up, you can always remember stories your grandparents told you, maybe books, you had a favorite book that your parents read to you at night, or that you read. Stories are really, they're like songs. They're like things that get stuck in our head. They're ways of communication. And what I teach my students and what we teach at my university is, if you can tell stories with data, and not like for babies, people think storytelling for
Right.
babies, no, but it's highlighting, a challenge. Ulysses faced challenges, he came back, and we all know the story of Ulysses, and he ultimately won, right? He succeeded. So if you can convey problems and issues and bring them to real life by involving people, places, the challenges, and then talk about how people solve the problems or issues, or how did they overcome. It's like a learning for other societies, for people who follow, to learn from that as well. And storytelling is naturally part of our society. Going back even before the written word, we were doing oral storytelling. And so the way that knowledge and information has been passed down by people since the beginning of time has been oral. And so this is where storytelling becomes very important as a technique for communication, for influencing, for getting people to take action. But it has to be backed up with information. But if you can present it in a way that resonates, where a person can hear it and go, I see that, I can relate to that, they might be more moved to action. And we see this with our students. When we can present something that's relatable, they'll be more willing to jump in and take action.
That's very interesting and intriguing, because we generally talk about storytelling in the context of early years of schooling.
Mhm.
That's where, but then in the context of GIS, to get even in the adult learning and adult education, to get the
Mhm.
concept like GIS clearer,
Mhm.
storytelling can be a very important tool as well.
Yes, most certainly. Hmm.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Dr. Sheila Steinberg. It's really been a pleasure having you. And I know our time difference, the India Standard Time and your Pacific Standard Time, it's almost about 12 hours of difference is
Hmm.
there, 11 and a half hours of difference. And you very kind of you to have agreed to be awake so early in the morning for this show. And thank you so much. Your final words to our audience and the viewers.
Okay, so thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. I'm an early bird, so I do wake up early. Not this early, but I did for Amitabh. So that's fun. And to talk to all of you. So my final words would be just believe in yourself, believe in your communities, have passion, and think about your neighbors and the people around you, which I know people in India do and people in the United States do as well. So just, step up. That's what Rotarians do. If there's a problem or issue that needs your assistance, put your shoulder behind it. Bring in your resources. We all can take action today. It just depends, where do you want to plug in your creative expertise and your passion. And so that's would be my closing words.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for such profound session and very, very learning and educative information. Thank you so much for being with us on our show, Dr. Sheila.
Thank you.
Friends, you were listening to Dr. Sheila Steinberg connecting with us live from Orange County. I'm sure I have personally benefited and learned a lot in the context of GIS, social science, and the environmental context, in the context of resilient communities and the psychosocial impact the pandemic can have on our society. We all agree that it's going to be a different world. We don't know when we are going to totally be out of it, but then we are going through this metamorphosis and we are going to come out evolved better than before because we are, our growth and progress will depend on the resilience that we are going to project in the times to come. And I'm sure that each one of you must have learned a lot and benefited from the presence and interaction with Dr. Sheila Steinberg. And friends, she very correctly pointed out that in a parting message that stay connected. The social networks have found even stronger relevance today. Stay connected, stay logical, stay creative, and use your critical thinking to siphon out the relevant and the logical information, because that's what is going to be our strength. That is what is going to make us even more resilient to pass through the times and the challenge that we are facing at the moment. So thank you so much for being with us. Those of you who are watching us live, and those of you who are going to watch us in the recorded mode. Even if you're watching us in the recorded mode, we will be more than happy to respond to your comments that you will put in even when you are watching in the recorded mode. Thank you so much. Stay tuned to the School Times. You are watching Ed-Talks with Amitabh, and I'm your friendly psychologist, Amitabh Mohan. Take care till we meet next. God bless.